I'm going to talk about A.J. Gibson, who was one of Missoula's most prolific architects as far as the number of projects he did, and was really influential in a lot of the early development of Missoula, especially with a lot of the major buildings that were built here in Missoula, as well as across the northwest here. He had projects all over, clear down to Hamilton, up to the northwest into Idaho, and even some buildings back in Ohio where he is from. He was born in Ohio in 1862 and came to Montana in 1883 after his father died. But in Ohio he worked on the farm and was more of a carpenter. He developed his skills as a carpenter and builder and designed and built several buildings related to the farms, but also was really how he was self-taught to be an architect and how buildings are actually put together. He came to Butte in 1883 and started work for Henry Patterson, who was a local builder there, and they built some of the early buildings in Butte. Patterson was pretty influential as far as architecture in Butte. He and Gibson were self-taught more as architects, and as Patterson went on to design some of the major structures in Butte. By 1888, though, Gibson decided that he needed to move on to some other area so he could have some more influence in the architecture and building. So he moved to Missoula in 1888 and started his own construction firm right behind his house there on 2nd Street, south between Orange and Higgins, and where his house still is. And he started building there and then decided to become more of an architect, again being self-taught and designing buildings, and really started to be very influential in the community. He started with some of the early buildings were like the first 5 buildings at the University of Montana. He designed Main Hall and the Science Building, which is gone, the Women's Dormitory, which is now the Math Building. That's one of his buildings, and then the first library on campus, officials, library as a building. He designed that in 1908, and that's where Jeanette Rankin Hall is right now. He also designed a gymnasium behind Main Hall for the campus, but of course that's been taken down too over the years as they moved the fields around to different locations. He had quite a sense of architecture and really, just understanding how buildings are put together and really how they related to the community, and so he got very involved in a lot more community projects. Of course, some of the early schools, Lowell School, Hawthorne School, those were his buildings. He also designed the first county school, county high school, which of course is Hellgate, and that center section is still there, that right where the main doors are off of Higgins there is part of his design, what's been added to over the years. He also was influential in the Missoula County Courthouse, designed that building, and was a very important person as far as not only designing it, but getting the community to be involved in building the courthouse. There was an original courthouse there, but they needed a bigger building, so we designed that in that sort of Beaux-Art style of architecture. Also, as far as some of the homes around Missoula, the Dixon House, which is now the Center of Repose over on Pine Street there, the Greeno Mansion, which of course is not moved up to the hill there as a restaurant in the 60s. That building was burned in the 1980s and was gone, but he also was involved in a lot of other houses and flats throughout the area. The University Flats, which is there on Higgins, just as you go off Brooks there, it's right behind the new metal building there. That was some of his flats that he designed. He called them flats. They're essentially apartments, but he was involved in a lot of those throughout that neighborhood especially. And also down in south in Hamilton area, he designed the courthouse there in Hamilton, which is now the Historical Museum. And he was involved also with the Daly Mansion. Designed that in 1910, and actually good architecture about that time in 1900. He still was influential in getting it built, which is essentially the third structure there that we have built over at the distance. His work like Frank Lloyd Wright and Bass Gilbert and some of those that got a lot of influence in Montana too. He probably did a lot more than they did as far as this community and really getting it going in that period from 1890 to about 1910. And again, influenced a lot of design up until his death. He and his wife, Maud Lockley, they were married in 1889. That was the year Montana became a state. She was from Butte, and they were married a year after he came here to Missoula. She was a photographer and writer, and really was influential in his work because she wrote a lot about his work, took photographs of it, wrote stories for the papers and things like that about the different activities. Both of them were also very influential as far as other community activities. They never had any children, but they did have a lot of children that came to stay with them for a while when people were having hard times. They were able to bring some of the younger children in and take care of them until people could get back on their feet. So they had that influence even though they didn't have children of their own. The automobile was something that they both liked. They liked to travel, so they were one of the first ones to have an automobile here in Missoula. And they traveled all over. They even went back to New York City, even though there weren't roads, so I'm sure half of it was on a rail car. But anyway, and then also went to Canada and Mexico and traveled all around. They were like the conservation of our natural wonders and things like that, and I think that influenced the gravestones that you see here, which Maud was the designer of, and she designed it mainly as a boulder, as with the Gibson name on the front and back, and then the two small headstones here. The saying that she has there, "I love thy rocks and rills, thy woods and templed hills." Does anybody know where what that came out of, or have you ever seen that in any? It's a hard one because we never sing the second verse of "My Country 'Tis of Thee," and that's where it's from. It's a patriotic song from 1932 that that was part of. But like I said, it's really a very influential family. Of course, the automobiles that also was part of their death. They were driving out to a nursery to get some flowers for a New Year's Eve party and crossed the tracks right around Grant Street there, and a freight train hit them, and they both died instantly from the freight train. So that's why they're both on December 31st, 1927, when they passed away. Again, some of the organization, he was American Order of Odd Fellows. That isn't right, I don't think, because we can't find anything else. It's supposed to be AOOF, but anyway, that's the only thing we can think of. It probably was, and she was a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution. But anyway, both very influential in the community, but as far as the architecture, A.J. Gibson was really very influential on how Missoula developed and how it became a great city. So, any questions or comments? Yeah.
Was she fit in the feminist causes quite a bit?
She was, yeah, oh yeah, very much so, and yeah, pretty influenced.
I didn't hear the story. Is he the architect?
Yeah.
Gibson Mansion?
Yeah, the Gibson Mansion, which is really the Peterson Mansion. They call it the Gibson Mansion because he was the architect, but Peterson was a drugstore where Butterfly Herbs is. It still says Peterson Drugs in the.
Where is that?
Downtown Missoula, there on the 200 block. But that's where the old drugstore. But the Peterson Mansion used to be over by the behind Hellgate High School, and
so that's been moved.
That's been moved. And the people there have decided rather than call it the Peterson Mansion, they call it the Gibson Mansion because he designed it and built it.
So it used to be behind in the university district.
Yeah, in the university, right where the gymnasium is, the new part of the gymnasium at Hellgate High School on Gerald there. That's where it used to sit.